Welcome to the Burst My Bubble podcast. Say hello, Mom.
Hi, Andrew.
I want to talk about my fear of hypodermic needles and HIV. Prior to January of 2020, I was catastrophizing about HIV, but literally like an hour into the new year, I stepped on some debris at a lounge, and then I went on Acentris and Truvada for a month. Do you remember that?
Yes, the emergency room doctors thought just to be cautious to do it.
Now looking back at pictures and photos, even thinking back to that time, I get sick to my stomach. I know Acentris and Truvada are medications that prevent HIV, but I start to get like really scared that by taking those, there was nothing to worry about. For all intents and purposes, I'm clean, I'm a healthy guy. I don't have any diseases or anything like that. But I'm worried by taking the anti-HIV medications, Acentris and Truvada, could I have infected myself with HIV?
Well, no, because if you look at the virus, which HIV is a virus that's going around now, that's a new virus, okay? They're giving people antiviral medications like gangbusters in the hospital. They wouldn't be giving the whole population that if it could hurt you. And those
right, it doesn't make sense. Like, for example, they wouldn't prescribe you a medication to give you HIV. You could sue the emergency room and the pharmacy if they did that. So,
oh God, yes.
So for all intents and purposes, let it go. But lately I've just become OCD, and like everywhere I go, I'm afraid I'm stepping on hypodermic needles. I'm afraid of things contaminating me with HIV, and I don't know. I don't know why this manifested and developed all of a sudden, but
well, because I think everybody being in and being quarantined and not in their regular routine, there's a level of anxiety and unknown about where things are headed. I think everybody's worried and scared. So that manifests into an anxiety kind of thinking. And you're not alone. I mean, you can't even make appointments with the doctors out there. There's so many people that are feeling the same thing.
When I talked to my doctor, Dr. Natural, about this, we discovered my fear of HIV is not getting sick and dying. My fear is more being alone my whole life, having no friends, no girlfriends, just being solitary. And he actually said, in a way, my fear of HIV has come true because, throughout my life, I've had very minimal friends, very minimal socialization. So, obviously, I'm not sick with HIV, but in a way, my fear has actually come true. So, but thankfully, I don't have HIV because no woman would want to date you, really, if you have that, right?
That's not necessarily true, Andrew. There's plenty of people out there that have viral type things and they just protect themselves and they protect the person that they care about. I mean, yes, it's not something that is ideal, but people live normal lives with that. And if they're with a partner, they can take medication to keep it from being transmitted. So if you're happy and successful in all of the areas of your life, if you met a partner that really cared about you, that shouldn't, if they're,
Right. It's kind of like if you find a partner who you truly love and truly loves you, yeah, right. Okay, let's move on from HIV. I feel like we exhausted that topic.
Okay.
Something that I want to get into is guilt. Sometimes I'll get like feelings that you, Dad, my stepdad are sadistic monsters, and you're the bane of my existence, and I'll get really raw, visceral, angry thoughts at you. And then, like, for example, I'll be outside and then you'll say something really nice to me and be really kind. Then I'll start to feel really guilty about having gotten those delusional thoughts.
Well, delusions are something that just happen, Andrew. The thing that I would do with them, because there are times, all human beings have thoughts, whatever, yours go a little bit more extreme.
Okay, so I'm going to explain to you so the line between fantasy and reality gets blurred in my mind. So, some people, when they daydream, they're able to distinguish what's fantasy, what's reality. sometimes in my mind, I'm not able to distinguish what is a daydream and what is reality. That's what's called a delusion. My delusions often correlate with emotion. Say you do something that irritates me for whatever reason, because everybody can irritate somebody. There's
Let
no
me ask
question. That's when I get delusional at you. When you say something that triggers me or irritates me, that's when I get delusional at you. The same is true for Dad. The same is true for my stepdad.
All right, let me ask you a question. People that are in your friend group, okay?
Yes.
What if somebody says something to irritate you in that arena? Do you have the same thought process?
I guess, like I said with my doctor, I know my parents are like my dumping ground, so I'm not as cautious. I'm able to not get delusional around friends. In a way, I do occasionally get delusional. Let's take my friends that I used to go out to eat with. Like sometimes I'll get like conspiracy delusions that they're bullies and they're secretly sabotaging me. So yeah, delusions creep in no matter who it's with. But it usually correlates with emotion. If they do something to trigger me or do something that peeves me, that's when I usually get like these delusions about somebody. It's untrue, or it's not a black and white kind of issue, but
and how much control do you feel you have over making them obey? Like how much control, like, do you find sometimes you like to go with them and like go down the tsunami, or do you find that if you really tried, you could stop it?
There are certain delusions I can stop. For example, I often feel a rock star as my biological father, whether it's Syd Barrett of Pink Floyd, whether it's Billy Joel. Something will trigger me. Like, for example, like you'll say something or Dad will do something that irritates me, angers me. Then I start to think. Then I start to think a rock star is my biological father, and I was tortured because you and Dad want to get vengeance on my biological father, whoever that might be. Then I calm down. The emotion tsunami dissipates, and I'm like, all right, my parents love me. Or sometimes it's a rock star is a good thing. Like, oh, my parents know a rock star's a biological father, and it's going to lead to me becoming a Hollywood superstar. Sometimes it's not like a sadistic conspiracy. But the biological father, sometimes I'm able to realize, my dad, Bob Kolosky, is my biological father. Other delusions that, I believe pop superstars like Taylor Swift and Lady Gaga know who I am. That never seems to dissipate. I usually, that's a permanent example of, and I believe a major motion picture company like Disney, Universal, Paramount, or Sony, or what I believe is secretly viewing me. I'm in a simulation, and
so that's a fixed delusion.
That's a delusion of grandiosity that never seems to go away. And I believe my videos are being secretly viewed, and when the time is right, when I get well, they're gonna make me a Hollywood superstar. So there are fixed delusions that never seem to go away. That sometimes it's negative delusions. Other times it can be positive that I'm going to be a Hollywood superstar. But yeah,
now let me see, Dr. Natural. What is his advice for moving forward when you get sidetracked in those thought processes?
Okay, there's a book called "I Never Promised You a Rose Garden" by Joanne Greenberg. For whatever reason, she developed a fantasy land, where she's a god of a planet, and basically she in the movie, in the book, she's a god, and I guess
she has control. She has control of herself.
In a way, I developed an internet fantasy land on the internet to protect me from extreme sadness, to protect me from the social isolation and trauma I lived through. With that being said, like the doctor says to Joanne Greenberg, I never promised you the real world would be a rose garden. I never promised you it would be rainbows and butterflies. I never promised you it would be peaches and cream. But if you want a life, you have to give up the fantasy land. You have to give up the daydreams. The daydreams can be comforting, especially when you live through a lot of trauma and you need the daydreams to protect you from extreme sadness and
so that's my question to you. With her, as with you, can you, like you say, there's fixed ones that don't go away, but can you move through them and not have them interrupt your day in the real world.
I'm not sure I understand your question. What I guess Dr. Natural was saying was, I developed a fantasy land online that I'm going to be a Hollywood superstar, that major motion picture companies, undercover celebrities are viewing me, and I basically created a fantasy land, and it protected me from extreme sadness, and what I need to do is the fantasy land is comforting, but if I want a real life in the real world, I have to give up my fantasy land, because it prevents me from working at the being a peer specialist at the psychosocial clubhouse. Why would I want to work as a peer specialist when I should be a Hollywood superstar, right?
Gotcha. But that's what I mean. So it does, in essence, prevent you by holding on to the one that's fixed. That was my question. By holding on to the ones that are fixed, the exciting ones, the great ones that you have that you said are fixed, is preventing you from the real world. So how do you let those go? Does Dr. Natural say?
Well, in the book, I Never Promised You a Rose Garden, Joanne Greenberg, he's like, I'm not gonna have you give up daydreams that you don't want to give up. You have to come to the realization yourself. And she slowly starts giving up the daydreams. And I guess she comes to the reality. The real world isn't as enticing, as exciting as a fantasy land. But if you want to make a full recovery, you have to give up the daydream world, because the daydream world, I never promised you the real world would be a rose garden. But unfortunately, the real world, if when your parents are older and no longer taking care of you, I never promised you. The fantasy world won't protect you from the harsh reality, basically.
It's a very, very interesting thing, and she does do it. She has her struggles, but she does do it. From what I gather, I didn't finish the book, but she does want the real world.
Yeah, Dr. Natural seems to feel the book I Never Promised You a Rose Garden, but I haven't read it really. He sent me some quotes that I read. Another thing that he seems, Joanne Greenberg does this without medication. Basically, she has an otherwise sound mind. It was trauma that made her develop the fantasy land. So the fantasy land made her protect. It was trauma that made her develop this fantasy land to protect her from extreme sadness, to protect her from lack of socialization or whatever. And this can be given up without medication, through cognitive behavioral therapy, a conscious effort. As you know, I'm practically the pharmacy at this point. I'm on a mega regimen of psychiatric medication, and maybe someday, like Joanne Greenberg, I could get rid of my fantasy land with a minimal dose of medication, because as we know, the psychiatric medications have so many adverse effects, so many side effects. And it's
I have a question for you about that, getting back to that topic. Do you ever see things in place of meds that work the same or better for you? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I think socialization is a key to recovery. A calm, stable environment. Basically, just getting out and socializing more, and having satisfaction in the real world. I mean, basically, if you sit alone at home, frustrated, and you're not getting out, you're not going to be able to come down on the medication, because you're pretty much just giving yourself negative mental health. But if you're socializing, if you have independence, if you have money, you might not need as much medication, because
you're happy. You're happy.
You have a real world. I mean, in a way, my fantasy land was created to protect me from the fact that I don't have a life. If I get a life in the real world, if I meet friends in the real world, why will I need to daydream? Pop superstars know who I am. Why will I need to daydream? Major motion picture companies are getting ready to hire me. I won't need that. I won't need that daydream, because that daydream protected me from the fact that I had no friends, that I had no job, and I was home all day long with you and my stepdad, an elderly couple. And I created the fantasy land because And there were barriers that prevented me from, socializing. For example, when I was bullied in middle and high school, and I never developed my social skills, so I didn't know how to socialize with people. I didn't know how to socialize with people, and I have crippling social anxiety. I feel like a defective freak, like everybody's viewing me in a critical way, and I stayed in my bedroom, safe, secure. But unfortunately, I wasted a lot of time, and
But let's look at the positive. See, I find that in this podcast, we're only focusing on the negative. There have been some major positive things that you've been able to overcome, have there not?
oh, absolutely.
So if
Starting in August of 2019, I met some friends at the Psychosocial Clubhouse. I started to meet the first real friends of my life. I began socializing. Unfortunately, in March of 2020,
the pandemic
the pandemic happened, and my social isolation happened again. I'm slowly but surely starting to see these friends again. But it's kind of like, will things ever get good? And they will. But
they
yeah,
will.
like even when I started to make so much progress and started to meet the first real friends of my life, then all of a sudden the pandemic, coronavirus happened. And
But there are bridges. There are bridges to that plateau that you can start climbing even with the pandemic. And I really think that that's the positive mindset. Somebody said to me just recently, even when somebody is in like a worst case scenario situation, say with their health, your attitude about how you're feeling is a lot of the battle. Keeping a positive attitude, kicks off endorphins, kicks off, chemicals in the body that are positive. Like when we drink our chamomile tea. I know that sounds vanilla honey chamomile tea. I know that sounds almost silly, but yet there's just in the name, there's a comfort, don't you think?
right, chamomile tea is great. It's relaxing. So I try not to drink so much caffeinated coffee. Try not. I mean, I already abstain from alcohol and things like that. But try not to drink so much coffee, and try to not eat junk food, like sugary junk food, and try to drink the chamomile tea at night rather than a Earl Grey black tea.
And that is, I believe, what it is.
Okay, no. Last thing.
Yes.
Artwork.
Mhm.
I create a lot of artwork. On YouTube, I'm a performance artist. I act. I give public speeches. I do comedy. I often express profound things about mental health. I do drawings too with you. We do art hour where I draw pictures, and they usually tell a story about mental health. That's kind of what I do. It's usually my artwork is mental health related. But is my artwork fueling my fantasy land? For example, I believe major motion picture companies, undercover celebrities are viewing my artwork, and I need to just accept reality for what it is. All evidence shows very few people are viewing my artwork. And yeah, I think I'm a talented artist. Yeah, I'm very good. Yeah, I'm a great performer. My drawings make profound points about mental health. But it kind of fuels the grandiosity that there's an undercover person who's viewing me, and when the time is right, we're gonna make the epic movie. So in a way, maybe abstaining from social media might be a good thing, because it fuels like the delusions of grandiosity.
So you've identified.
But with that being said, there's lots of good to my artwork too. I feel validated. I feel heard. If I wasn't doing my artwork, what would I do to release my pent up frustrations, pent up steam? Like, because it's the most therapeutic and healthy thing for me. But so there are lots of people that write journals. In a way, my internet art is a public digital journal where I journalize my thoughts, where I journalize my frustrations. So there's a positive outlet to the artwork too. But
I still think, and this would be between you and Dr. Natural, but I still think once the pandemic is done and you're moving in, not so much on the internet, the media, more in the real world, I think that it's going to validate you even more because it's reality based. I just think validation.
Right. So basically, when I get a job in the real world, let's say a peer specialist at the Psychosocial Clubhouse, make money on my own, so I could take an acting class in real life at a real location.
And somebody says to you, "Good job." That was like, for instance, when you looked at that thumb drive and you looked back and work that you did in the real world. It's such a thrilling feeling that somebody said, "Wow, fabulous job. You were awarded by a Fortune 500 company money at a job of something that you did in marketing." Like, that is to me different than hits and views, because I don't see the media world as real. I mean, I know your generation does, but I don't see it as real. To me, I would rather be in where yes, there's criticisms in the real world too. As us, I'm sure there are media. I'm sure media criticisms come out too. But I think that I don't know. I just think that there's more meat to being praised in the real world.
I know you seem to feel my biggest accomplishment is what I accomplished at college, my degree, my marketing projects, but actually I'm more proud of my social media profiles, my YouTube, the hard work I did in my drawings than I ever was. I feel like I put more hard work into my social media presence, into my artwork, and I'm actually more proud. And I think it's so much better. I didn't work very hard at college. I was lazy.
No, you did though. You did Shakespeare on stage. I mean, how many people can say they did Shakespeare on stage?
My performances on YouTube are so much better than the Shakespeare performance I did for the media class. I feel like the best performances I've ever done, I'm doing right now on social media. There's just nobody viewing it.
I thought your comedy, really felt, this is just my opinion, and who am I, but I felt your comedy that you did, the first two comedies that you did, were very funny. And you have a presence. You have a presence when you're doing that. I find that the
comedy I did at the Psychosocial Clubhouse?
Yes. The first one was my favorite of all favorites. Yeah, I just think that's, to me, being a public speaker, perhaps with a comedic, be like serious issues. Sometimes when somebody presents them and is able to present them where they're not so depressing, almost where you're able to laugh. You have that ability. You have that ability to pull people in and make people smile because you smile. Do you know what I mean? Do you ever see a comedian, or do you ever see somebody that delivers a speech that might be very, very serious, but yet with a little lightness? It's received so much better. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
In comedy, I just find that you have that ability. You have that comedic ability.
Right.
You have a funny personality, and right. I think that's something to explore. But anyway, I guess that's what it is. Staying focused on positivity, moving ahead, staying in the real world, and focusing on your strengths. We all need to do that at this time with the pandemic. But, it's almost like the whole world is going to come gushing forward once this thing is, once they open everything up, because everybody so needs to find their passions, right?
Yeah.
So is what it is?
That is what it is.
Signing off on Andrew's podcast.
Signing off.